Hi, everybody, and welcome to STEMspiration. I am very excited today to have Alissa Eckert with us. I have been stalking Alissa for probably about a year for this webinar. I read about her, like I said, about a year ago. I don't remember where it was or what I was looking at, but her story really intrigued me because she is a medical illustrator for the CDC and was part of the team that designed the coronavirus illustration that we are all so familiar with these days. And just hearing her story and how she came about this illustration really made me start thinking about careers in science and art, how they sometimes join together. And so I'm excited to hear about her story. She works for the CDC, as I said. She received her master's degree from the Medical Illustration Graduate Program in Augusta in 2006. She earned a BFA in scientific illustration from the University of Georgia, and she serves all areas of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, working in 3D and 2D illustration, animation, and 3D printing and model creation. So I'm really excited to have her here with us today. And I'm just going to let you go ahead and take it away. I'm going to encourage folks on Facebook and on our webinar today to ask questions. And we will, I'll interrupt Alissa as I need to, but we'll just take it from here, and I'll let you take it from here. And I look forward to hearing more.
Okay, great. So I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen. Make sure we got that working. Can you see it?
It's coming up. There we go. We got it.
So, yeah, I really wanted to just be able to talk about medical illustration and what it is, because a lot of people don't even know what that means, first off, and talk to you all about how I got into this field of medical illustration and how my interest as a kid even led me to it. And so, but first I want to express my appreciation for the invitation to speak today. And you know, it's just really important to talk about, to educate our future generations on what this topic is. So I didn't even know about what medical illustration was till I was in my 20s. So we're going to change that for some people. And so I am one of the medical illustrators at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. And this is most of my team of medical illustrators. Not everybody's present here, but it's most of us. I'm straight in the center, blonde. And so, of course, like Leslie was saying, some of you may recognize this image, but before we talk about that, I'll start out and tell you about how I got into the field and what kind of person it actually takes to do this. So as a child, I was always drawing, and I just wanted to share some examples I did when I was a kid, and nothing super outrageous, just doodles that kids do, you know. And so those ones on the right, animals, I always like to draw animals, and those were about when I was in middle school. I think maybe I was 12 or 13. And then the dog on the left, that was when I was about 15, one of my first drawing classes in high school. And while I was doing these sort of things, I was also taking classes in high school in science, all throughout high school, classes like biology and comparative anatomy, zoology, physics, and chemistry, classes that I just really wanted to take. And I thought, for comparison, I'll show you some more of my animal drawings that I've done today. These are recent, all from this past year, just to give you a comparison of where I was to where I am now. And so back to when I was in high school, I focused my electives on both art and science. I took a lot of classes like honors in AP biology, zoology, and comparative, like I was saying, and physics and chemistry. But then I also did graphic design and illustration classes and even photography. And these were classes that helped prepare me for my college coursework as well. That led into biology and everything that I had to take in college. And I was also I started working at a veterinary hospital my senior year of high school, all the way through college. And so when I went on to college, I started out as a biology major, planning on being a veterinarian. That was my original goal. I was working at the veterinary hospital as a technician, and I had 3 years of biology and scientific coursework under my belt. And I had been taking all these art classes for my electives through college, just for fun, because I was good at it and wanted to explore that world. But then I learned about medical illustration. People were seeing I happened to just come across somebody that told me that maybe you need to look more into this. You have this artwork that you do, and you're very science minded. So I learned about the medical illustration program and the undergraduate scientific illustration program at the University of Georgia. And I thought, I could do this. This is perfect for me. It combines both of my two skills. So I contacted the program and spoke to the director, and he said it was, I'd be a perfect fit for the program. And so then I applied and moved to a new school and city to pursue my goal of master's in medical illustration. And then I went on, I applied to the graduate program after I graduated from undergrad, and went on to Medical College of Georgia and was accepted. And it was a 2-year intensive program studying both medicine and art. And I was 1 out of 7 people chosen that year for my class. And right after Medical College of Georgia, I started right at the CDC, and I've been there for 15 years. And so that's my track of where I've been. And so I wanted to share some examples now of our medical illustration work that we do at the CDC. And there's really quite a broad range of areas that we do. It just covers all the bases at CDC. So I've done over 100 birth defect images. So these images are designed to be sort of a softer type of image that parents could engage with to learn about the defects of their babies. Something that was easier to look at than a photograph. So you can see the soft tones, and it makes the imagery more approachable when trying to learn and understand what your baby might look like. We've done many studies of ferrets for a more scientific audience. These are more finite detail specific things that are going on, and these images appear in things like scientific journals most of the time. And I've done many animals, and these act as vectors for diseases. So that's why we tend to do a lot of them. And so you got mice and monkeys and bats, rats, etc. And then here's some of our 3D pathogen work. You may see some of this from time to time. Often type news networks, you'll see some of these on. So we have here the norovirus, HPV, and amoeba, the Campylobacter, and Cryptosporidium. And then we've even done 3D animations. And here's an animation of hair cells damaging from loud sound. And this involves the creation of storyboarding and concepts, and just being able to tell a story. And then in 2019, we created 3D images of the deadliest bacteria for the Antibiotic Resistance Threats Report. So this was 21 3D medical images of antibiotic resistance bacteria and fungi, and it was designed to be shown all the way up to poster size. Each had deliverables of both dark and light backgrounds in many different formats and sizes, used across many different platforms and various contexts. And so the white background versions were used more for scientific versus the editorial uses that you see on the right, across CDC and externally. And so here are some of the inside pages of the report. And so you can see how this demonstrates how the images were used to help explain the scientific data. It helps bring the information to life on the page. And then here are some of the designs meant for social media. So these are what we called our trading cards, and they were profiling the most urgent of bugs. These are the Instagram stories, but they were all made in all different social media sizes for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So the purpose was to sort of capture attention and bring people back to the website to learn more. And so you see the large scale poster examples here. These are the images from the UN General Assembly, the AMR Challenge, the September 2019 in New York City. And then after that, we also do 3D work, 3D models, actual live 3D printed or casted models. And so you can see the printed ones here, we would create those in the 3D programs that we have and print them on a powder printer or there are resin printers. And then the foot and arm, for example, were both molded and casted from silicone and then airbrushed to give these lifelike features that you see. And a lot of these times they'll be used for training or educational purposes. So you want to know what exactly is a medical illustrator. So medical illustration's truly an interdisciplinary field. It's a creative combination of the visual arts, health science, and education and communications all in one. And the medical illustrator actually translates that complex biological and medical information into visual representations, which people can easily understand, all while maintaining aesthetics, accuracy, and clarity. So a medical illustrator acts as the illustrator, the consultant, and the administrator in their role. And they're both an artist and a scientist. So Leonardo da Vinci is one of the first medical illustrators in the contemporary sense. So he melded a scientific understanding of anatomy with great artistic skill. His 800 anatomical drawings went unpublished until the 1800s, but there's so much information out there. So here's some other early examples of anatomy exploration. Even from the 1500s, you can see the skin layers were pulled back to reveal this musculature underneath. So you see that curiosity even then for understanding what was there. And here's another example. You see a flayed cadaver holds the skin in one hand and dissecting knife in the other, and you'll notice all the detailed musculature there. And then after Da Vinci was Andreas Vesalius. He was a Belgian-born anatomist and physician born in 1514 into a family of physicians. And he's considered basically the father of modern anatomy. And he began his medical career by authoring and publishing the De Corpus Fabrica Humani. It's the most well-known book of anatomy ever. And here's a 17th century engraving of a pregnant woman is dissected so that flaps resemble petals of a flower with the baby at the center. And then you see in the 1600s, anatomists began to collect and exhibit bodies and body parts, and the human body acted as it was a sculpture and were put on display. And then by the 1800s, anatomy became more investigational. It was no longer defined as, it was now more defined as science rather than just art. And you can see on the cadaver drawings on the upper right, all the labeled parts like it was actually being studied. And then at the end of the 19th century, a young artist persuaded him to leave his native Germany and pursue medical illustration at Johns Hopkins. And so he defined the profession of medical illustration, and that was Max Bradel. And he started the first school of medical illustration. In 1911, he became the director of the Department of Applied Arts Medicine at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And so in the 19th century, new printing techniques began to allow the illustrators to work in a variety of media, and you see color printing started becoming more popular and was refined and actually became practical. And so when we talk about the modern medical illustrator, they work in a variety of disciplines. It's not limited to universities, hospitals, forensics, law firms, animation, freelance, and even in government. And so there's a variety of disciplines of what a medical illustrator can actually work in. And so there are 4 accredited schools for medical illustration in North America, and it's Johns Hopkins, and then the Georgia program at Augusta University, the University of Toronto, and the University of Illinois at Chicago. And here's a list of schools in North America that provide certificate programs on the left and then undergraduate degree programs on the right.
Alissa, what's a certificate versus, I mean, what is this, do you know what a certificate is versus?
I don't think it's a 4-year bachelor's program, or maybe it's not accredited necessarily. These are the, like the University of Georgia is the accredited program, and it's the 4-year bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. And a certificate, I don't know exactly, maybe it's a 2-year or something. Mm-hmm. Let's see. And talk about the coursework. So the coursework is made up of classes often with the medical students. So subjects are always science, anatomy, pathology, physiology, embryology, neuroanatomy, and along with surgical illustration. Other classes include color theory, instructional design, photography, interactive media development. It'd be 3D modeling and web design, and along with traditional drawing and computer applications as well. And then there is the Association of Medical Illustrators, which is an international organization, and currently we have 868 members. And so it's a great organization to help encourage and educate the profession. And so there's a yearly conference in the US where everybody comes together, learn all about medical illustration, and it's a great place to learn and just be a part of the community. So I definitely recommend that for anybody that's curious about medical illustration world and getting into, is it right for them, to definitely reach out to that and find out more. And so now I want to get back to the COVID-19. A lot of the work that I do involves emergency response work. And so CDC's ability to communicate consistent, accurate, and actionable information during an emergency is a key countermeasure during a public health emergency. So our emergency response and pandemic planning work as medical illustrators dates all the way back to the H5N1 and H1N1, the Haiti earthquake with cholera, and then, of course, Ebola and Zika, and now coronavirus. And so at times like this, it's literally like an all hands on deck situation around CDC, and it can require long hours, on-call duties for nights and weekends, and immediate turnaround for work. And I'm talking about within the day. And so this information has to get out to the public. These responses are typically carried out through a campaign with, it can be a branding and a style guide and with formatted templates. And so there is the JIC, the Joint Information Center at CDC, which is a 24-hour emergency preparedness unit comprised of cross-agency staff. And so the JIC actually will respond to the emergency by collecting and creating all the materials and distributing the health messages to specific audiences. And this is where we come in as medical illustrators. So we will work directly with the JIC on creating the imagery for the messaging that goes out to the public. And so for the COVID-19, it started in late January, just after the Emergency Operations Center opened at CDC. And we were called upon to create an image of the novel coronavirus, something that could represent this unseen, unknown public enemy. So we started setting up our communication goals. So here's what we knew at that time. We knew we wanted to make basically a public health emergency alert. We needed people to notice and pay attention to this looming threat and take it seriously. So we needed to invoke this emotional response to help people grasp the gravity of the situation. At the time, not a lot of people knew what was going on and how much of a threat this actually was. So we needed to draw people back to the CDC to find out further information. And we needed to grab our viewers' attention, but we needed to do it quickly. So our image needed to be striking, yet bold and beautiful and engaging. And so when the virus is seen on a news website or scrolling through social media, it is fighting against a lot of this other sources of information out there. So it needs to be able to grab the viewer instantly. So on Facebook, you have like what, 1 to 3 seconds to grab your viewer's attention. So we had to figure all this out and do it within about a week's time. And so at first we questioned whether design, like what were we going with? A simple generic coronavirus, since we were so early in the game and there were so many unknowns, and there was mostly no information out at the time. And then the full genome had just been posted on GenBank and GISAID, so we could see the phylogenetic tree and that it was distantly related to the SARS virus. And so we got confirmation on that and then moved forward. And both Dan Higgins and I, we have a basic understanding of viral structures, and so from our background and our training from our science background. So we knew what to look for, and we needed proteins to incorporate. So we went to the protein data bank, which is a repository for 3D dimensional structural biological molecules. So there was nothing representing the SARS-CoV-2 out at the time on the PDB. So we used the S protein and E protein from the SARS virus, and they look exactly the same from this level of view. So it wasn't a problem at all. And then we ended up having to make our own representation of the M protein. And so this is how it kind of works. We start out with the PDB file, and we took it into a program called Chimera. And then and that's the top left image. And then we export that out and take it into, we make our surface view and then export that out and take it into ZBrush so we could refine it and get it optimized to then take into our final program, which was 3ds Max. And that's where we set up all the lighting and just got our studio set up. Think of it as like your photography studio. And so to achieve our designs, we relied on a few principles of design. So we started with our detail. We wanted to reduce the amount of detail down to just what was necessary. So we worked with realism, using depth of field, lighting, texturing. The sense of realism sort of creates a sense of belief in the image. And so then after that, we worked with contrast. And in the colors and the lighting, it creates a sense of drama and helps us elicit that emotional response that was needed. And then emphasis. So we wanted to be able to distinguish the structures from each other, like how the red really stands out. And then the color, we use color to help convey the serious tone. We didn't want it to feel necessarily friendly because people wouldn't pay attention, or it might lose some credibility. And then we kind of relied on red because it helps with the health alert idea, and it complemented well with the other protein colors. So, and the gray, it really offset well with the gray and they popped off of the gray background. So, and it also helped focus on the coronavirus S protein, which is that identifying feature of this virus. So in our final steps, we would then submit this to our quality assurance and quality control expert at CDC to verify that it met CDC's expectations. So then it went back through clearance and through the JEC, and through everyone agreed that this is what we wanted scientifically and aesthetically. Yeah, and there was those ideas. Okay. And here's a look at the original branding package that was being developed at the same time. And it was something that was easily reproduced and adjusted for the so many different designers that were working on this response. And so we knew what we needed it to work cohesively with. So I took some of these colors and I tried some of those cooler tones and just to test things out, and it didn't work at all. The image fell completely flat and it just didn't speak to me. So we definitely knew we needed the bolder, warmer tones to work with. And here are some additional deliverables. We decided to develop as part of the package. So there was a whole package that was posted. So because we had that single close-up shot, we also wanted to do one that was more of a scene for editorial purposes. And this is sort of like a group interacting in the natural environment. And then we have a couple animated deliverables. And they were more for designers and editors to use at CDC and materials. And there's also the one on the lower right was also posted on CDC's website to be downloaded as B-roll, and news organizations or whoever can use them for their materials. And then we also did 3D prints up in the upper left. Those are some design, the 3D prints that we did. And then there's a vector version of the illustration, more flat, cartoony look.
And my understanding from reading an article, Alissa, is that you guys did this like all within 7 days or something crazy like that. So like,
yeah.
I mean, that's like, I mean, were you just working crazy hours? And I mean, what did that look like in your job and personal life?
I wish I could remember exactly what hours we worked. The whole year has been a lot of crazy hours, put it that way. For this specific project, the single illustration itself took the week. The prints came after that, and then this illustration, the lower right illustration there, came as well. Just we had different deliverables that started popping up after that week. Probably all by the end of March or so, everything was done, I'd say. I can't remember exactly, but it wasn't, this was our primary topic we were working on at that time, put it that way. And so you can still see it living today, residing in its place on the homepage of CDC's website.
Not for long. Just kidding.
So it was first released on the digital press kit at CDC, and it had begun to be immediately downloaded. The PHIL, the Public Health Image Library at CDC, the download site, had an increase of 40 to 56% on the first 2 months after the release. So the average downloads on the site is between 15 to 20,000 downloads per week. And so, however, during the week of February 23rd of 2020, there were 24,000. And then during the week of March 1st, there were 31,000 visitors, which translates into a 40 to 56% increase. So, you know, that's pretty interesting data to look at to see if a single illustration can impact that much. So when all within this was all within a matter of days, it started appearing on major news sites around the U.S. and it was appearing on AP, Reuters, Stat News, Drudge, CNN, BBC, Fox, and MSN homepage. It was everywhere. And then I even saw it as the icon for the ABC National Special News Report with the task force at the time. And then it began appearing on covers of magazines. It was like the New Scientist you see here. And then it was even on a cover of Time magazine. And then newspaper prints. This was a special edition of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It got a full page spread there. And then local news stations across the country started using it everywhere. And then it even made it down to the local community material level. And across the world, this is TV and newspapers in the Netherlands, for example. And it made its way into general television programs. So here it is on the show with the doctors. And then it was even on comedy television like SNL, and it was on John Oliver, and I saw it on a documentary and a Netflix documentary. So, and then the news started becoming more interested in us, the artists. And I had tons of interviews with radio, newspapers, magazines, podcasts all over the world. And I had interviews with Canada, UK, Norway, Brazil, Australia. Even the governor posted about us, the governor of Georgia. But what's most interesting was the spread in the art culture within the public. So people started expressing their feelings and making things. And so here are the little hacky sack like knitted characters that I love. These are some of my favorites. And then there's homemade piñatas. And there were even people getting tattoos. But my favorite one is the cookies. So Jay's Bakery and Cafe in Florida was shut down for 2 weeks. And then the new normal started when they started reopening. They made these fun cookies to lighten the mood and handle it with humor like Floridians typically do, right? And so people wanted these cookies like crazy, and they were selling out every day. And people started having these for COVID quarantine birthdays. And she started making them Corona nuts, that she called them, which were donuts. And it just expanded from there. There's the Corona nuts. And then it was such a hit, she started moving into different pandemic themes, and they made care packages for graduates with these cookies. So it was great to see how it helped business. And so a professor teaching an infectious disease class at American University had his students draw their interpretations of the virus. And this is what some of them came up with without him showing my image in the class. You can see how some of them had that imagery in their head, which is interesting to see. But the best part is inspiring the future medical illustrators. So I received these drawings from a 5-year-old girl living in California that loves to draw viruses. I have to say, some of her viruses are better than some of the scientist drawings that we'll receive sometimes. So this is some of the viruses that she's done. I thought these were really cute. That's cool. And she's very proud of them. So. So I just wanted to highlight some of the achievements from the past year. Design block called Medical Illustration, a top trend for 2021. I thought that's really cool, and that helps the field so much. So it's great to see that out there. And Nature magazine called it one of the best science images of 2020. And then we've won a few awards for it so far too. The first was in the Association of Medical Illustrators 2020 Salon. It received the Certificate of Merit. And then New York Design Awards, that won a Gold Award. And then we also received the Design Museum's Beasley Design of the Year Awards for the graphics category, which is a big international award. So that one was super exciting. And what's interesting, it's even become the graphical representation of the generic term for virus on Wikipedia now.
Wow.
And so basically the take home from this is it's just amazing to see how art can infiltrate the world, and what an honor it actually is to be able to educate the masses through art and have a direct impact on people's health and safety. So I just wanted to thank you again for inviting me here today and allowing me to share my development of the coronavirus image and the world of medical illustration. And
yeah, I have a few questions for sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to know, I mean, at what point, and you can stop sharing too so people can see you. But at what point did you really realize, like, wow, this is sort of taking off? And like, were you proud of the illustration? I mean, were you like, when did you feel that feeling of pride, I guess, around this project? Or is it just kind of like, this is my job and it is what it is?
Well, that's an interesting question, because we have had projects in the past that have been seen on news sites and on TV programs and things like that too. So at first we were thinking it was just more along the lines of some of those other big projects that we've done. I don't know. I guess it really was struck hard when I saw it on the task force thing on the ABC News special report. I was like, wow, it's even representing the pandemic at this point is what it did. It wasn't just a graphic in the background. It was an icon at that point. So I think for me, that was the moment I was like, oh, step back for a minute.
Is there, do you now, when you look back at it, I mean, is there anything you wish that you had done differently as far as the illustration goes? Or is it just, do you feel, I mean, I'm sure you can always make changes to stuff, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's always techniques that I would like to have tried differently on the surface, in the surface quality and things like that. I have played with it just for my own personal lighting. I did some different lighting effects that no one will ever see. I just wanted to see what would happen and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, there's always tweaks that could be done.
It's interesting, guys, looking at the shadows that, that the proteins cast, it is, I mean, I don't know, I've never thought about that in terms of, I mean, I don't think about diseases very often and what they look like, but it's just an interesting approach. It just does make it very realistic.
Thanks. And so, yeah, I wanted to play personally with the lighting to try the cool, warm lighting scenario, see what it does. Sometimes that can make it a little more eerie. So it knocked it down a level. So I couldn't use that, but I just wanted to see what sort of effect that would have on it. And emotional.
Yeah. And I'm curious about sort of the world of medical illustrators in terms of, it seems like a very small group. I mean, you had like 7 or 9 folks in your class. I mean, that's a very small class. And so is it a pretty competitive industry to get into, or is it just that it's really niche?
The school, I mean, of course, you takes very specific type of people, first of all, but the year I applied, for example, I think there were like 50 applicants, so 7 out of 50, and at my school, and then there's 3 other schools in North America, and but there's jobs for everybody once they graduate. We usually don't have a problem finding people jobs. Mm-hmm. There's that. So if you can make it and you think this is for you, there'll be something waiting for you.
And so I guess what are like the top 3 like attributes that you think a good medical illustrator should have in terms of, whether it's their interest or maybe it's, what skills should young people sort of hone in order for them to be successful at something like medical illustration?
Yeah, it definitely takes more of a technically minded person. And of course, this whole anatomy, science mind and art mind, you got to be able to tell a story. But you have to have that interest in science. That's definitely a big part of it, because if you don't find the subject matter interesting, you're going to have issues, right? But a lot of this style of drawing requires a very technical style, which is different than a lot of more conceptual art. So in school, a lot of what they worked us on was drawing figures, the human anatomy, drawing hands, because hands and feet are some of the hardest things to draw. So practicing drawing that over and over again. That was our homework, like every night, draw your hands.
Yeah, my kid actually always is asking us to like, can you put your hand like this? Or, like they ask me to do something like to do that so that they can draw it. Like we're sitting and watching TV and they ask me to do that. It's funny.
Yeah, so that's very important, being able to draw the human figure. It's very hard to do. Not a lot of people can do that. So it's something to practice.
Yeah. Let's see. We have a question here from Layla, and I'm not quite sure what she means, but she says, can you offer examples of CDC criteria for approvals? And so maybe she's just asking, like, what does the CDC, when you present them an illustration, what are other people or the quality control person looking for?
Oh, well, our specific quality control person has a background in design, and so you'd have to really ask her what all she's looking for, but she has a huge checklist that she goes through that we have as well to make sure that as we are creating these things, that we are meeting these requirements as well. But following design trends, popular design trends, is definitely an important aspect to look for, and communicating. Does this communicate to your audience? I think that's the biggest thing. What is your audience going to react to this and get from it and understand? Are you educating? So is our mission, our purpose achieved?
That's great. And you say that the art, you have to be very technical, right? So in normal like art, we don't think of like a wrong way or a right way, but it seems like in this situation, there may be right and wrong. But in your experience, has there ever been have you ever disagreed with like the direction of something, and how do you manage that in terms of like interpreting what it is communicating, whether it's coronavirus or probably all the other images that you work on?
So if you have something that you don't agree with, how do you solve that problem? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah. Or is there an example that you have of that?
Gosh, I can't think off the top of my head. If there's always times where you don't agree with the client. Always, you have one idea and they have another, but in the end, you kind of have to meet halfway or closer to what they want, because you have to deliver to the client what they need and their goals. It's their project. They're reaching out to their audience. It's not me directly talking to the audience. So you have to do what they need you to do. But at the same time, you'll try to educate your client on why you want to do these things, and see if you can have that conversation, and if that conversation will work. But it doesn't always. Sometimes they'll come around and see your way, but in the end, if it doesn't work, you have to do what they want to do in the end. So
and this kind of relates to, see, I think Vicky has a question. How many people were on the team to develop the coronavirus illustration, and were there any big debates? It doesn't sound like you really had time for debate, but
luckily Dan and I, it was just two of us, Dan and I, and him and I have worked together since I started at CDC. So we know each other, how we work, and we had been preparing for this for a very long time, developing our skills in creating viruses, both of us specifically. So basically for us, it was just a divide and conquer situation. I don't know how else to explain it. He did this, I did that. And then we met at the end and made our decisions we sat down together and finalized the colors. And that's kind of how it happened. There wasn't really time for any, no, I don't like that. It was hey, Dan, what do you think of this? And he's like, yes or no. And he would guide me to the colors or whatever was next. So it worked out pretty smooth.
Sometimes it's nicer when there's no time. You just got to plow ahead, and then there's no chance for debate in a way. And Vicky also asks, did you ever dream that you'd become famous in this role?
Well, whoever thought a medical illustrator would really have their name out there and be known? So it's really interesting just to see how the medical illustration field has become known now, because we always struggled with that, just educating people on what it is. And so I think that in itself is fascinating to see how that will change throughout the years. Maybe it's going to become a much bigger field now, and be incorporated more into movie making and things like that. Who knows?
It's like when CSI came out and everybody then wanted to become a forensic, scientist. That's kind of cool that it's maybe a new boom
Yeah.
um, of careers. And but kind of related to that in a way, is, one of my questions is like, you are an artist, but you work for a big, really, really big agency organization. And so you don't necessarily own your art. Like a lot of times I think artists do, want to express themselves through their art. That's why they become artists. And, they like to put their name on things, or it's like really a personal expression. And so, now that you're, further along in your career, how do you sort of still feed that artist in you, while you're working within the framework of, a large government organization and something that is really rigid in some ways because it is related to science?
Well, did you see those dog drawings that I did at the very beginning that I showed you? That's what I've been doing, in my personal time. I'll do a lot of animal drawings and things like that, things that I want to do. If I'm not fulfilling myself in the artwork that I want to do, I'll still do it on the side, but I've had some pretty good projects at work as well, artistically, like that antibiotic resistance project that I showed a lot of colorful artwork from. That was like my baby project. I spent a whole year on that, and just designing and coming up with that. And I got to be really artistic with that in mind. Like the way I came up with the idea for the designs for that was, I wanted to think of something in nature to replicate. So I started looking around on Pinterest and thinking about animals and nature. And then I thought about underwater sea creatures. And then I went towards jellyfish, bright colors. And so we went from there, and I got to be really artistic with that. And so that was an extremely fun project, and trying to emulate that with the materials and in 3D and sort of get that soft. It was a lot of fun. So, you can still have a lot of fun and be in a big organization.
Yeah, you can fulfill yourself for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. Hold on, sorry, I got my screen went crazy. So what I'm curious about, like your go-to, applications that you use when starting a project. Like, do you go to paper and pen or pencil, or is it always digital right away, or is it jump right into like a 3D application, or what's your kind of go-to application?
It completely depends on the project. So like those birth effects, I will start those with pencil and paper, drawing the figure. It's not really that great thing to do it in 3D, more realistic looking as the drawing. But with the virus, that's all computer. So it just completely depends what type of illustration I'm doing or artwork. Animations will start storyboards usually, and 50-50 whether I draw those by hand or if I'll do those with 3D assets. Depends what the topic is and what assets I already have built and that sort of thing.
And do you have a preferred route that or preferred kind of project that you like?
I like doing 3D a lot. I mean, that's definitely is get in there and just, you can do so much with all the materials and the lighting, and it's just way beyond anything I can do with my pencil. So
yeah, that's cool. Let's see. Oh, it's funny. Brandon just asked the same question. And the graphics programs that you use, are they generally used in different industries or just mainly for medical illustration? Because I heard you mention something that sounded familiar. I forget what it was, not the 3D one, but there was one that you mentioned that I was like, oh, it sounds familiar to me. But
or Chimera.
That's what it was. Yeah, Chimera.
Chimera is used mostly by scientists. Visualization program to visualize the molecule data. Yeah, the other is industry-wide stuff, the ZBrush and 3ds Max, and then Adobe products. The last product that I used was After Effects to finalize everything and put all the particles in and that sort of thing. So those are major players in software industry.
Yeah, Adobe is definitely a big one.
Special effects and all that people.
Yeah, cool. Well, great. I'm just trying to see if there are any other questions. I don't have any here. But Thank you. I feel like it's really interesting to learn about this pathway and this, this career, and it's such a unique way to blend a passion for science and
Yeah.
art. So it's really cool to meet you. And any last words of wisdom for folks that maybe either have an inkling towards science or art, that are maybe on a path? Like, what words of what advice would you give?
Yeah, I had to make that decision, and it was a very hard decision. What do I want to do with, but I'm with what I am doing today, I am able to fulfill both areas of the science and art. If you're struggling with which way do I want to go, medical illustration really does involve you in both worlds. I meet with scientists all the time, but I'm working with artists all the time. And so it's a great way to be able to tell the stories of the science visually.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. And let me just ask one more question is, what are you working on now? What's next? Like what's
still coronavirus.
Is it? Yeah.
Every day I'm working on an activity book for children at the border. So that's what.
Oh, interesting.
COVID. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So yeah, do you think that that'll be like at least another, in terms of what your focus, it's going to just be a lot of education for the next year or so, like on this virus still?
I don't really get any specific updates about that, but as far as we can see, that's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool.
Right now, but.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you, Alissa. Thanks for your time and for sharing it. And we will definitely spread this out and get it to our schools so that young people do get to see, what's available to them in this world. So appreciate it.
Welcome any questions about medical illustration or whatever. So.
Okay, cool. Well, good. Have a great evening, and thanks again.